Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Thailand says it is moving to expel Cambodian troops as fighting along their disputed border intensifies, with Cambodia reporting 6 dead. Both sides blame each other as the violence undermines a Trump-brokered ceasefire that halted earlier July clashes. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says Japan's claim that Chinese fighter jets targeted radar on Japanese aircraft is completely unacceptable. Japan calls the encounter dangerous, while China accuses Tokyo of repeatedly approaching and disrupting its navy during training. Japan lifts tsunami warnings after a 7.5 magnitude quake injures at least 30 people and forces around 90,000 to evacuate in the northeast. Small waves were recorded, power is back on, and authorities warn the risk of a major aftershock remains high for a week. Billionaire and Trump ally Andrej Babis has been appointed Czech Prime Minister, signalling possible cuts to Ukraine aid and tense EU relations. President Peter Pavel named him after his party win in October. Israel says its forces struck Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon, including a Radwan training compound, military structures and a launch site. The strikes come days after both countries sent civil envoys to a ceasefire monitoring committee. Russian drone attacks hit Sumy for a second time in 24 hours, with more than 10 strikes in half an hour, knocking out power across the city. Authorities say critical infrastructure is running on reserve as the region copes with the blackout. Honduran candidate Salvador Nasrallah accuses rival Nasri Asfura, backed by President Trump, of stealing the election as Asfura holds a narrow lead. Nasrallah claims system failures and manipulation occurred as ballots favouring him were being counted. EU climate monitors say 2025 is on track to tie 2023 as the hottest year ever recorded, following 2024's record heat. Global temperatures from January to November were 1.48 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. We start this hour with some breaking news, and tragedy has struck in Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, as a devastating fire rages at the Terra Drone building on JLN. Jetland Supranatro in central Jakarta. Authorities are still working to extinguish the blaze, and reports confirm that at least 17 people have died. Many workers remain trapped inside the building, and emergency teams are deliberately trying to rescue survivors. Police have confirmed the fatalities and are continuing to investigate the cause of the fire. The situation remains critical, with officials urging caution as the firefighting efforts continue. We'll, of course, bring you all the updates coming your way as that situation develops. We next move to Southeast Asia, and in Cambodia, at least 7 civilians have been killed and 20 others injured in renewed Thai attacks along the Cambodia-Thailand border, according to official sources from Cambodia. Cambodia's defense ministry confirmed the casualties, while former leader Hun Sen said Cambodian forces retaliated after holding back for 2 days. Meanwhile, Thailand reports further losses on its side. The Thai army says 2 more soldiers were killed in border clashes, bringing the total military death toll to 3. 1 soldier died in Surin province after coming under indirect fire, while another was killed by a grenade attack near the Preah Vihear Temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The strikes come a day after US President Donald Trump repeated his claim of ending 8 global conflicts, including the Thailand-Cambodia dispute. The escalation has marked the worst fighting since a ceasefire in July and a peace agreement reached in October during Trump's Asia tour. Both sides have traded blame, accusing each other of violating the ceasefire, and tensions have remained high since Thailand halted implementation of the deal in November following a landmine blast that injured a Thai soldier, an accusation Cambodia denies. We are joined by Dr. Astha Chadha. She is an associate professor of international relations at Ritsumeikan University, located in Tokyo, in Japan. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Chadha. As always, it's a pleasure. Of course, this was originally brokered by Donald Trump in July, and now things seem to be flaring up once again. What more can you tell us about this developing situation and how fast it has escalated?
Absolutely. I think, back then when I was discussing on your channel regarding the President Trump mediated Kuala Lumpur peace accords, even then we had expressed this concern that we don't know how long this is going to last, because even though the accords do in some way address the temporary conflict in itself, they do not address the unresolved territorial dispute, which is regarding the border demarcation and ancient temple sites, so on and so forth. And this recent incident just highlights the amount of mistrust that exists among public, because there is a public support as well. In some way, they are saying that this issue is kind of politicized to distract people from the other internal issues that relate to economy and security. But that being said, doesn't deny the fact that this peace accord today stands failed. It stands it lacks. It pretty much shows that there isn't enough political commitment to maintain the peace on the border. And lastly, one thing I must mention, we've long heard about ASEAN unity and stability, but there is a lot of relative silence from the rest of ASEAN members, apart from Malaysia, which is chairing the ASEAN summit this year. We do not see a lot of other ASEAN members trying to not interfere, but at least trying to broker some sort of peace. So this, even though it should have been an internal conflict treated as a bilateral one between two states and then ASEAN states trying to in some way restore stability, we do not see that happening. So no matter what President Trump says with regard to him having brokered certain peace, that was clearly very, very temporary.
Dr. Chadha, what cards do both sides hold? Of course, this peace deal was brokered a few months back now, but Cambodia is notably smaller than Thailand. It has a much weaker economy than Thailand. If you could explain the cards that both sides hold and what they want in this conflict.
I mean, see, one thing is the fact that it is a colonial, sort of post-colonial dispute that has stretched so far, because, there is, like I said, very little political commitment to actually resolving an undemarcated border. So that's one. And what that does is that eventually, I mean, if you look at both the sides, both Thailand and Cambodia, they are relatively smaller states, but Thailand clearly is economically more stable. It is a larger economy. It has definitely a larger force. But the risk here is that probably now Cambodia is also going to ramp up its defenses. Cambodia will have to ramp up both investment into the defenses and also procurement of defense equipment, because this conflict is clearly not ending. Even if it does stop temporarily on both sides, we do know that there is an economic sort of a crisis brewing in both the economies, and this would be, if it is politicized, then this would be the perfect opportunity for both sides to pretty much politicize a border dispute, an unresolved border, and take public attention away from the domestic issues that are prevailing in both the countries. And we do know that both of them are clearly, at least politically, they're not very, very stable at this point. So for this is pretty much bad news for both Cambodia and Thailand, because this leads to more instability, this leads to more anxiety among people, this leads to probably a possibility of higher nationalism on both sides. But the third thing is, both of them have so far not expressed any, I mean, they are, I hope they do look towards exercising restraint, but there have been no talks as such in terms of whether they can resume those peace accords or would they want a third party to mediate. This is all, pretty much bad news. And the fact that, like I mentioned, other ASEAN nations also do not seem very keen at this point to halt the conflict. They are asking for restraint, but that's all that they're doing. We do not see them actively participating and channelizing the ASEAN forum in some way so as to go beyond their usual affairs that relate to trade and regional economics, and going slightly into the regional stability domain, and trying to make sure that this conflict does not erupt ever again.
Dr. Chadha, stay with us as we have further updates coming out of East Asia this time, and China's foreign ministry says its exercises and training in relevant waters fully comply with international law and practice, and that Beijing has expressed its stern position clearly as it pushes back against Japan over a tense radar lock incident. Beijing now claims its military aircraft activated radar on Japanese fighter jets only for search purposes, calling it a normal measure to ensure flight safety. China accuses Japan of intruding into its training zones and disrupting normal military activity. Tokyo strongly denies that, insisting its F-15s maintained a safe distance and did nothing provocative. Japan says a Chinese J-15 intermittently locked fire control radar on its jets twice on Saturday, once for about 3 minutes and later for nearly 30. Japan has lodged a formal protest calling the act dangerous and extremely regrettable, while China urges Tokyo to stop slandering and smearing. The incident marks one of the most serious aerial escalations between the two countries in years. Dr. Chadha joins us once again. Dr. Chadha, China says this is fully compliant with international law. Radar locking a foreign fighter for minutes at a time, does that qualify as lawful under such aviation norms?
I mean, absolutely not, because this is clearly a violation of, sort of a long-standing agreement between nations wherein they do not enter, close to each other's territories. And if there is a misunderstanding, they try and resolve it rather than locking onto each other's jets and escalating the conflict. But we must also understand the Chinese position. For them, it's a naval training exercise. They think they're operating in international waters. According to them, they were very close to Okinawa, where Japan does host U.S. forces and U.S. military base. And then lastly, I mean, from China's perspective, there have been some statements from Japan that have, in some way bothered them. And one of those was by the Prime Minister equating Taiwanese security to Japanese security. So amidst all of that, of course, China does not look at its own actions as provocative. They feel that provocation came from the other side. But again, I mean, we must not forget that is this the first time this is happening, in terms of Chinese naval training exercises or any sort of military exercising happening around the Japanese islands, whether it's the Senkaku Islands or it's the Okinawa. China has maintained certain military presence around any territory that it thinks is disputed, as well as around Taiwan, as well as very close to Okinawa. And at this point, at this stage, the timing is very, very interesting. The fact that US has in some way pledged support to Taiwan, Japan has openly, for the first time in history, come out and claimed that they are going to in some way channelize their defense forces, if there were to be an issue with Taiwan. We can see geopolitically too much is happening, and this can clearly be read as China trying to send warning signals, not just to Japan, but to the rest of East Asia as well as the United States.
Yeah, and Dr. Chadha, this only seems to be escalating with the diplomatic language being rather strong, particularly from the East Asian region. Do you see this de-escalating, particularly with Japan's new Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi at the helm?
I mean, Prime Minister Takaichi had been very clear, when she took office, she was very clear about two things. I mean, she wanted to increase the Japanese defense budget. That was very clear. And two, she wanted to take a very strong position on China, specifically with regard to Chinese violation of, Japanese sovereignty in any way. That is, whether it's through exercises or through diplomatic language, so on and so forth. So, I mean, that being said, even though they are, we are seeing these incidents, I don't see it as very likely that this would result in an actual military clash, though the risk of an unintended, miscalculated military clash still looms. But we are hoping that there wouldn't be too much of an overreaction, because too much is at stake at this point. I mean, it's not just between China, Taiwan, and Japan anymore. You have other extra-regional parties engaged. That's one. Two, these areas, specifically these waters, are very important for the vital international shipping lanes, and any further militarization would create a trouble not just for the East Asia but for the rest of the Indo-Pacific as well. So I think the stakes are too high. We are hoping that there won't be an overreaction. That being said, the current language and the way we are seeing responses, this is definitely a break from how usual diplomacy is conducted in East Asia.
Dr. Chadha, do stay with us once again. We have our final update from the region. South Korea says it scrambled fighter jets on Tuesday after Chinese and Russian military aircraft entered and exited its Korea Air Defense Identification Zone, otherwise known as KADIS. According to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 7 Russian and 2 Chinese aircraft flew into the zone at around 10 a.m. local time before departing, and at no point violated South Korean territorial airspace. South Korean forces identified the aircraft early and deployed fighters as a precaution in case of contingencies. The aircraft reportedly remained in the KADIS for about an hour, manoeuvring off the country's east and south coasts. Initial local media reports suggesting as many as 11 aircraft were involved, though the military later confirmed 9. Joint Chinese-Russian flights around the Korean peninsula are not uncommon, with such operations typically taking place once or twice a year, according to South Korean officials. Dr. Chadha, do you think this was just one of these routine flights or something more?
Well, I mean, clearly there are two aspects to this. One is the fact that had it been routine, it would have been informed through a prior notice. But if you read into what South Korea is mentioning regarding KADIS, they clearly say that they had to scramble the fighter jets precisely because they did not know. They had no prior notice of this joint strategic air patrols that China and Russia were conducting. That's one. Two, on the Russia and China side, they say that they are trying to assert, because they did not violate anyone's airspace, and they do not recognize that area as a sovereign airspace. For them, it was a simple freedom of navigation overflight exercise that they were conducting. But let's not forget that this exercise is clearly a show of a very strong, strengthening China-Russia partnership, specifically in the fields of defense. And two, the region, especially East Asian region right now, is suffering from heightened tensions. There's a lot of watchfulness, a lot of caution in the area. So even if there is no violation per se of a sovereign airspace, other parties are going to remain very watchful, very careful, and they're going to be ready to respond, so as to not escalate the conflict, but definitely so as to show that they also have ready responses in place. So again, from a China-Russia perspective, they might not have violated anything, but then a prior notice would have probably not alerted South Korea the way it did, and not further heightened tensions in the region that is already suffering from a lot of diplomatic and territorial dispute-related tensions.
Dr. Asda Chadha, always an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
We now move on over to South Asia, and Indigo passengers' struggles continue as nearly 500 flights have now been cancelled, with 152 flights in Delhi and 121 in Bangalore being the worst affected. In response to the large-scale disruptions, the Ministry of Civil Aviation has directed the airline to reduce 5% of its winter schedule flights. while the airline had initially been granted a 6% increase. Its inability to manage operations efficiently prompted the reduction. The MOCA is scheduled to hold a review meeting with top officials from all airline operators today in an effort to ensure that a crisis similar to the recent Indigo operational disruptions does not reoccur. Meanwhile, amid the operational crisis, the government conducted a surprise audit of the Delhi airport. Joining us now is Vandana Singh. She is an aviation expert. She joins us live from New Delhi. Great to talk to you again, Vandana. Thank you for joining us. We spoke about the same thing before. Realistically, how long will it take for Indigo's operations to stabilise? Are more cancellations even more likely before this gets any better?
Thank you once again for having me on your show. And I would like to clearly state that it will take at least up to 15th of December, which I've been maintaining right from the beginning, that for this backlog to clear and for some sort of normalcy to come about as far as Indigo operations are concerned. It is for sure that this is decreasing gradually and aircrafts are taking off on time, but we cannot expect it to get to normal as of 10th, as was told earlier. So I already maintained that it will take up to 15th easily, because there's a huge backlog to clear. There are passengers still stranded at the airport as we speak, and there are also the passengers who are booking or who have booked prior in advance, say a month or so, for flights which are happening now. So what happens to them? So all of it is a big mess, and the mess takes time to clear. And secondly, as far as the slot reduction is concerned, it is an immediate risk move. This was expected. Because Indigo obviously could not manage. So another 110 to 126 flights a day is what Indigo is going to lose with a 5% reduction. But that's the right step by the government, by the Directorate General of Civil Aviation to take, and the Ministry of Civil Aviation to come down tight and strict with stringent measures on Indigo. Over to you.
Yeah, and this surprise audit at Delhi airport today, is this about optics or do audits like this genuinely fix reliability?
It genuinely fix reliability. The reason is now everybody is fed up. We have to understand that these are private carriers, but they have no business to abuse or mislead or cheat or lie just because they don't want to follow a certain aviation law, which is mandated by the government of India, and try to get away with it. They cannot get away with it. So the surprise audit was in the coming, and more other surprise audits will happen, whether it's on maintenance, whether it's to check rostering is being done properly, whether it's to check the slots are being managed properly, whether it is to check on the punctuality or the behavior as such, as well, how are they managing the passengers, because we know that the passengers have been harassed beyond belief, and this is something that the government had to come on and take the responsibility, because end of the day the law of the land has to be followed by whoever is there, and 65% share doesn't mean that you can arm twist, dictate and chokehold the government and the people who are the passengers in this case. Over to you, sir.
Vandana Singh, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for taking the time. We now move on to our final story of the hour, and the International Monetary Fund has approved Pakistan's latest loan review, unlocking $1.2 billion and keeping the country's bailout program on track. The IMF board signed off on $1 billion under the extended fund facility and another $200 million under its resilience and sustainability facility, bringing total disbursement so far to about $3.3 billion. The IMF says Pakistan must maintain prudent policies to cement macroeconomic stability while pushing ahead with revenue reforms, privatisation and measures that support sustainable private sector-led growth. The approval follows an October staff-level agreement noting progress on inflation, foreign exchange reserves and investor sentiment. Pakistan has pledged to keep monetary policy tight, strengthening public finances and advance structural reforms, including its first major privatisation in nearly 2 decades. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif says bidding for a majority stake in Pakistan International Airlines is scheduled for December the 23rd. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.